that's already okay. Bring them up to all that's expected.
Probably used to do that. You never know. I want to make sure, trying to get in early, so there's Google, and you can get signed again. There we go, live streamed. Good morning. I'm going to call the meeting at 9:33. I'm going to just start by saying that in response to COVID-19, we continue to hold our council meetings electronically. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments or requests to delegate for planning-related items, including the official plan review, via email to planning@middlesexcentre.on.ca. All written delegation and correspondence submissions will form a part of the public record. Members of the public are also invited to participate in the meeting of council by accessing the meeting, which will be live streamed on our Middlesex Centre YouTube channel. There are no additions to today's agenda. I'll ask members of council, does anyone have a conflict to declare? Seeing none, then we're going to move to the meat of today's meeting, which is the official plan review. I'm going to call for a motion to move into public meeting, and the motion is that council move into a public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act as amended for the purpose of the official plan public meeting. A mover, please, and a seconder. Councillor Arts and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And thank you, everyone. So now, just before we begin, members of the public that are participating virtually in today's public meeting have previously provided notification to the municipal clerk in advance of the meeting. If anyone wishes to receive further notification, I ask that you please send an email to planning@middlesexcentre.on.ca requesting further clarification, or pardon me, notification. Please be advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record. Those who have requested to speak will be given a maximum of 10 minutes to address council and provide comments on the official plan review. In keeping with our procedural bylaw and our R-zone policy, I would remind all of our meeting participants to use respectful language and uphold values of cooperation, trust, and openness. The order of proceeding is going to be as follows. I will ask the planning consultants to provide an overview of the public meeting reports. Then I'll ask members of council to ask questions of the presenters. And then members of the public who have registered to speak will be asked for their comments. Please ensure that you state your name and address so that comments can be reflected in the minutes. If there are any members of the public attending the meeting virtually who would like to comment, they will have an option to do so by using the raise hand feature following registered speakers. I will then consider a motion to receive presentation and comments as information. I would remind all attendees that no decision on the official plan will be made today. So now we can get to the presentations, and I know our presenters are here. The first presentation is the official plan review presentation, and Matt Alexander and Greg Bender, who are in attendance on behalf of WSP Consultants, are going to provide an overview of the official plan review meeting presentation. So good morning, Matt and Greg. The floor is yours if you'd like to make your presentation.
Good morning. Greg Bender will be beginning the presentation with an introduction, and then I'll be speaking to the majority of the presentation. Just give me a moment to share my screen and we'll get going.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Greg Bender. I'm from WSP supporting Matt on the official plan project. Wanted to walk you through the agenda this morning, which is to talk about the purpose of this meeting, an overview of the OP review, as well as the engagement activities that have been done to date. Review some of the project highlights, some question and answers, obviously, and then talk about next steps. Next slide, please. So in terms of the introductions of project team from the municipal side, it's certainly it's Michael, as well as Heather, From the county, it's Marion Cabral. And then from WSP, it's myself, as I mentioned, Matt Alexander and William Turman, who are all here looking forward to the discussion today. The intent of this meeting is to provide an overview of the official plan process, present the changes to the official plan that we've recommended, and also to understand what the feedback is. So to hear from yourselves as well as stakeholders and members of the public. Next slide. So what is the purpose of the official plan? It is a long-term document, a long-term policy document that manages growth and change in municipalities. It includes a number of goals and objectives that really sets the tone for the policies which would follow relating to land use, agriculture, how growth is to be accommodated in settlement areas, how natural areas are to be protected and conserved, how economic development is to be accommodated and pursued, as well as social and servicing matters. Now, the question is why did the official plan need to be updated? Now, the current official plan, which is currently in force and effect, has not had any really major policy updates since 2011. And now, since 2011, many municipalities, such as yourselves, have experienced a number of policy changes at the provincial level. And so that's one of the reasons why the municipality had to undertake an official plan review at this time, because of the number of changes that have happened from a provincial and as well as county policy regime. So the task that we undertook was conduct a number of sort of public consultation engagement activities, research and analysis on what has changed and how that can influence your official plan. We reviewed your current official plan and identified a number of policies that needed to be updated as it relates to, again, that provincial policy level, the county policy level, but also specific policy areas provided by yourselves from the municipality. We did undertake a comprehensive review of settlement areas to ensure that there's sufficient land for the next 25 years, which is a requirement. It is the horizon of the official plan. We had to develop and evaluate growth scenarios to understand how that growth is to be accommodated, as well as reviewing and updating all of your schedules, the maps that accompany the official plan. In terms of the work plan, this was done over over a year. It started in phase one through a project initiation meeting. We also identified through that as a strategy to understand how we were going to engage through the process. We met with your strategic plan consultant and received feedback on that to ensure that we were integrated through the process. We had a section 26 meeting, which was really the kickoff for this exercise and to understand what some of those issues that needed to be addressed through the process. We also conducted a visioning survey, again, to understand what the vision of the municipality is and how that could be put forward in the official plan. Phase two is really a background review phase. We had committee meetings, we had pre-consultation meetings with the county. We also had a policy and visioning workshops to understand, again, sort of input from your constituents as well as other stakeholders on the inputting of the process. We also prepared discussion papers and also a document that identified where some of those alignment issues were, so they could be addressed in the official plan amendment. Phase three, which began earlier this year, started with a directions and recommendations report, 2 committee meetings, a public open house, and then sort of finalizing those other documents, the document alignment, as well as a recommendations report, which then fed into the process to update the official plan, which is what we're here today to talk about. That included also engagement with both committees, a statutory public open house, and obviously this meeting that we're here today to talk to you about. Next steps would include council's consideration of the official plan amendment for adoption, as well as forthcoming zoning bylaw amendments. And now I'm going to turn it over to Matt so he can talk to you about the project highlights.
Thanks a lot, Greg. So the highlights of the project really began with that section 26 meeting that council mentioned. That kicked off the whole thing and really set the stage for our priorities moving forward with the official plan review. The vision survey received more than 280 responses from members of the public. We held stakeholder advisory committee meetings during each phase of the project to get direct feedback from individuals with a specific interest in the official plan review. We also held a policy and vision workshop, again, to establish what's the intent here of the community for growth and development over the next 25 years. We held 2 different public open houses to present our work as it had been completed to date, and of course this public meeting as well. So these were all opportunities for the public to provide feedback hear what we're up to, and for us to understand the objectives and the preferred outcomes of this official plan review. This is just a list of the various studies and reports that we prepared in support of the official plan review. These have all been uploaded to the Middlesex Center official plan review project website. So I'm not going to get into a lot of details on these. Of course, we also made presentations to council and the public related to the content of these presentations or these studies. So the real meat and potatoes of this public meeting is to talk about the key changes to the official plan. We have recommended approximately 150 individual changes to the official plan, which are all outlined in the draft official plan amendment document and shown in the draft redline official plan, which uses track changes to show where we've recommended some deletions and where we've recommended new text. So these changes include updated language for consistency with the provincial policy statement and the county official plan, basically just updating terms and phrases that are found in those documents. We've also attempted to simplify and clarify policies. Sometimes what happens is over the years, policies get amended and the language can become cumbersome. So we've tried to simplify that so that it's easier to understand in plain language. And of course, we've updated the official plan with new growth forecasts as supported by Watson and Associates, who you will hear from after us. We have introduced a future expansion area overlay as well as policies. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Some new policies related to additional residential units, and these are second units or basement suites, basement apartments, that sort of thing. There's new legislation since the official plan was last updated, so we needed to update those policies. Similarly, on-farm diversified uses are a new concept, new term anyway, for an old concept mostly, that needed some specific policies in the official plan. We also added secondary plan policies because there was interest in making sure that new large-scale development follows a more comprehensive process. And we've adjusted and updated the policies related to surplus farm dwelling severances. And that's really in response to the interim control bylaw that council passed relating to these severances and an attempt to address the issues that you've seen come forward. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the growth forecast because Watson and Associates is following our presentation. But essentially what we're looking at is as a percentage of total housing growth, we're looking at Komoka-Kilworth accommodating approximately 58% of the new growth that's forecasted for the municipality. Ilderton accommodating about 21%, Arva at 7%, Delaware at 7%, and a remaining 7% that we expect to occur in the other hamlets and rural areas. And that's really going to be the result of individual severances here and there. But the direction that we're seeing through these forecasts is that the most growth is most likely to take place within Komoka and Kilworth, Ilderton, and Arva. And so that's essentially the basis for any of our recommendations related to settlement areas. As a big part of this official plan review, and again, Watson's going to talk about this in more detail, but a big component of this was the land needs assessment. To summarize the findings of Watson's report, the analysis indicates that there's just enough of a total supply of potential housing units in registered and draft approved plans and through potential intensification to accommodate the short-term housing demand for Middlesex Center. So what that means is you already have a number of housing units in approved and draft approved development proposals that haven't yet been built, but we would expect to be built in the short term, and through intensification, as in development on vacant lots or things like adding additional units to existing dwellings in order to accommodate short-term growth. Each settlement area has an adequate supply of designated residential lands. Plus, we would expect a certain amount of intensification to take place, and this should be sufficient to accommodate growth over the next 15 years. Of course, the official plan is for a period of about 25 years. So based on the anticipated housing demand over the planning horizon, there is a need for boundary expansions in Ilderton and Arva, which should total about 116 gross hectares. So that's before taking away things like natural features that need to be protected, roads, utility corridors, or other things that would be subtracted from that. In Kamoka Kilworth, we've identified a surplus of about 27 gross hectares. So that means that there's no justification for expanding lands surrounding Kamoka Kilworth. And in Delaware, the supply of urban residential lands are sufficient to accommodate the long-term housing demand. And we may also get into this in a little bit more detail later, but Delaware is in a special circumstance where it's on partial services, and that really constrains the amount of growth that can be directed there prior to having plans established for full municipal services. And that's policy direction. It's not even necessarily a general planning approach. The provincial policy statement puts limits on the amount of new growth that can take place on parcel services. So how does this affect the settlement area boundaries? At this time, the way that we've structured the official plan update, we're not proposing to change any of the existing settlement area boundaries at this moment. Instead, we'll talk about it later, the future expansion areas are proposed, but based on growth allocations and forecasts, the existing boundaries appear to be adequate to accommodate growth that's expected in the near term, as I mentioned, within the next 5 to 15 years. And one of the reasons why we're not recommending expansions to accommodate that growth that is expected after the next 15 years is because the municipal services for Delaware and Arva haven't reached a state of planning where we're comfortable saying that it is available or planned. So the provincial policy statement says that an expansion can only occur where municipal services are planned or exist. And so actually, we'll get into the next bit. So because of that, we still want to indicate where that expansion is likely to take place. And so we're proposing adding this future expansion area overlay to the land use schedules to say, this is where we expect the expansion of the settlement areas to occur. However, there is a need to do additional work to demonstrate how they will be serviced before we can make that formal expansion. Ideally, we would have been able to do that during this review, but through the review, we determined that the servicing isn't there yet. It hasn't been planned to the extent necessary to justify that expansion. And in the case of Arva, you can see that there are large areas that are proposed for development, but they haven't been built out yet. And so it makes more sense to allow those areas to get filled in before you expand them. And as I mentioned in Delaware, the issue of it being on partial services also constrains the amount of development that may be justified there. And I'm sure there will be questions. So we will, I'm sure we'll come back to it, but I wanted to cover some of the other policy changes that we're recommending. Related to additional residential units, the Planning Act requires these to be permitted wherever single detached homes, semi-detached homes, or row houses are permitted. And so we're recommending changes to policy 9.6.1, which is specific to additional residential units, where we're adjusting the language essentially to state that a maximum of 2 additional residential units would be permitted per lot, and it must be less than 49% of the size of the primary residential unit. Essentially, what we don't want to see is people building second houses on their lots. We want it to be clear that any additional residential unit is intended to be secondary to the main dwelling. Sort of related to this, garden suites. Previously, the official plan did not permit garden suites anywhere. The Planning Act actually allows them to be permitted as a temporary use for up to 20 years. Whether council chooses to approve any individual garden suite is up to you, and it depends on the circumstances. But we felt that it was advisable to remove that prohibition because garden suites provide a flexible, affordable way of providing housing. It's not considered an additional dwelling unit because it's not permanent, and it would not be permitted if there's already an additional residential unit in the dwelling on the property. And finally, we were asked to talk about prefabricated housing and tiny dwellings. So we've added language to the official plan, which encourages innovative, diverse, and affordable housing, and defines these as dwelling units that may be constructed off-site. They are not on wheels, but essentially they may be moved in the future, and they may be primary or secondary unit on a lot, all subject to building code, proper servicing, and zoning regulations. On-farm diversified uses are a major policy interest in rural communities. The intent is to allow farm operators to supplement their income through a secondary use on their property. The intent is that it not become the primary use of the property. So if a farmer wants to have a cafe or a restaurant, that might be appropriate, but we wouldn't want it to become the primary use of that property. We still want to support farming and see farming as the primary use of agricultural lots. So we've added a definition as well as a description of what on-farm diversified uses might look like, such as home occupations, home industries, small-scale retail, agricultural tourism, value-added agricultural uses, like a farmer's market, a winery or cidery or a brewery. And the key criteria here is it must be secondary to the principal agricultural use. The maximum area that it can occupy would be 2% of the property up to 1 hectare, and that it does not prevent or preclude the agricultural use of the property. And what that comes into is we wouldn't want to see something like a barn used as a wedding venue, as a sort of primarily used as a wedding venue. We'd rather that those farm buildings be used for farm operations. So that's really what that's about. The secondary plan policies that I mentioned, a secondary plan is a very detailed official plan amendment that provides area-specific policies for an area of the municipality where major changes are expected. It's a comprehensive planning exercise to assign land use designations and special policies, specific policies for that area to address the needs of that specific area. It's not a new idea. The official plan already has policies related to secondary plans, but we've expanded that a bit and also introduced this concept of privately initiated secondary plans, essentially stating that if a major landowner wants to create a secondary plan for their lot, for their property, prior to a major subdivision, for example, that the municipality, it would encourage or support that, provided that they go through this process of engaging the municipality in pre-application consultation, demonstrating that it's supported by a variety of studies, essentially making a mini official plan for their proposal, rather than just coming to the municipality with a big subdivision, which which can shorten timelines, of course, but the risk is that they come to you with something that you can't really support and that you would like to see planned out a little bit better. This gives you an avenue to direct or ask developers to take things a little bit more holistically and get into a bit more detail about what they would like to see with their property. Regarding surplus farm dwelling severances, this is of course where two farm properties that each have a residence on them come under the same ownership, and therefore the owner would like to sever one of the existing dwellings either as income or as a retirement home for themselves, a retirement property for themselves, or simply to, in some cases, it's for their children. They would like to sever that off so that their children would have a home there. We've refined the text in section 10.3.2 to address some of the concerns that were raised through that interim control bylaw. We've attempted to address concerns about speculative severances and inappropriate rural development. The risk with this kind of policy is that you may find a speculative developer buying up a lot of farmland and looking to sever off the homes in the hopes that they can then develop the rest of the farmland in the future. So we want to try to prevent that sort of thing. We want to preserve agricultural land for agricultural uses. The major changes are that rather than replicating the policies that are found in the county official plan, we've stated that in addition to the county policies, the following policies apply in Middlesex Center. We clarify that a consolidation occurs when there are two lots that are part of the same operation. We've clarified that both the existing and the new property must have a habitable dwelling to be considered surplus. We don't want to see these severances occur to sever some derelict falling over old farmhouse. It needs to be a legitimate habitable existing dwelling. Direct road frontage would be required, and the new lot and any accessory buildings must meet the zoning requirements. Sometimes the way that farms have been built, farm dwellings have been built, there might be an accessory building in front of the building or too close, or some of the existing farm buildings might be too close to the lot line. So the purpose of that policy is basically to make sure that all that gets cleaned up before the severance is approved. And here we've just provided the actual policy with the red line changes for review. And so we can come back to it if there are specific questions. So those are highlights of the changes. Like I said, there's over 150 something changes that we've proposed, and it's all shown in the red line. But of course, we don't have time to get into every single piece here today. But there is the opportunity to go to the project website, review those documents. You should be able to, anybody should be able to hit Control F on their keyboard, find specific terms to, if they have a particular interest in something. And of course, the table of contents helps as well. As we receive comments, we've received a number of comments that are very insightful and are looking for specific outcomes in the official plan. Absolutely welcome that. We love to see comments that identify a specific policy and suggest a specific change. So anybody reviewing, watching at home, those are the kinds of comments that are really helpful for us because we don't have to guess what people would like to see. So please have a look, let us know what you think. So the next steps here, I'm sure we'll continue to receive comments from residents and property owners and the development community related to this official plan. We will review those comments as well as any comments and questions received from council and make final revisions to the official plan as well as the draft official plan amendment. And once that is ready, we will present to council the amendment for adoption. And this provides the official plan review project website on the municipality's website. Any comments can be emailed to planning@middlesexcenter.on.ca. And I would be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
And thank you for that, Matt and Greg. I'm going to look to council. We have time for questions, but I'm wondering, is your preference to ask on this content right away, or would you prefer to move through? And I see nodding, move through or move through. Okay, so we'll get all of the content and then we'll just start talking. All right, in that case, I will ask then that Jamie Cook, who is representing Watson Associates, provide an overview of the presentation that he has.
Hi there, good morning, Council and members of the public. My name is Jamie Cook, and I'm with Watson Associates, and I'm going to provide a bit more detail on the background work for the growth management strategy that was provided as a key background document to the official plan review. If you just give me a moment, I'll share my screen. Are you seeing that screen up on the board now?
Yes, we do.
Great, perfect. Okay,
Yep.
so I'll just
Go
jump
ahead.
into things. Sorry, just moving on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm just having this freeze on me a bit. There we go. Okay. So just to provide you a bit of background, our firm was retained back in around 2020 with WSP to support the work on the official plan review. Our main role was to provide the detailed growth management strategy for the official plan review. And some of the key outcomes of this study were to provide a long-term growth forecast for population, housing, and employment out to the year 2046. We also prepared an economic diversification strategy, an urban land needs analysis, as well as several strategic policy recommendations with respect to both residential and non-residential land and growth. Just to provide you a bit of background, we were also retained in 2020 to assist Middlesex County in preparing and assisting their updated growth projections for their official plan review. So as part of that process, we prepared a updated countywide forecast and allocations for each of the local municipalities for Middlesex County, including Middlesex Center. A range of scenarios were provided as part of that analysis. And as part of that work, we did prepare a high scenario, reference scenario, and a low scenario. And for this official plan review, we are recommending the high scenario moving forward for Middlesex Center. So you can see here on the map that this is obviously a map of Middlesex County with each of the municipalities. You can see historically the area's been growing at a fairly moderate rate of about 0.5%. As you all know, in recent years, growth has been accelerating within the county and with many of the municipalities. And that acceleration has been something that's been taking place over quite a bit of time. We saw some major changes occurring around 2015. And then with the latest impacts of COVID, we've seen further acceleration in growth. And we do expect that acceleration to continue over the near term and longer term forecast period. Overall, for the county, we projected 3 scenarios, as I mentioned, and they range from an average annual growth rate of about 0.9% in the low to 1.3% for the medium and about 1.5% for the high scenario. And just to put that into context, the annual growth rate for the province as a whole is around just over 1%, around 1.1, 1.2%. It's been climbing a bit as well over in recent years. But this rate of growth would represent a high growth area of the province. It's comparable with and even higher in some cases to the outer ring municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So just to provide you that overall context of how things are growing at a more regional level. Wanted to just focus a little bit on some of the growth drivers and disruptors of growth within Middlesex Center. within that overall regional context. And so this map provides a summary of the commuter shed within Middlesex Center. It shows basically where the labor force largely works. And you can see that most of the commuting is happening within Middlesex Center, as well as the City of London. About 86% of all residents commute either within the City of London, with the majority of that commuting being in that city, of about 72%. Middlesex Center accounts for about 14%. And then the rest of the commuting is elsewhere in the county and other areas in the surrounding region. And it's important to recognize that the future population growth of Middlesex Center is really closely tied to the economic potential of this broader region. And as I mentioned, the overall outlook for economic growth in this broader region has been improving. The area was hit quite hard during the economic downturn in 2008 and 9, and has been on a steady rebound since that time. Notwithstanding the recent downturn we've experienced from COVID in 2020, things are continuing to rebound relatively sharply with respect to overall labor force growth and economic output. When we look at the forecast growth for jobs within London, this area is projected to grow by about 60,000 jobs to around 2044, which is the long-term horizon of their growth projections. And then Middlesex Center itself is expected to add about 6,000 jobs over that long-term period. So building on that broader economic potential and leveraging the profile of this broader economic region is really a key economic development strategy and a key point that I would look to help explain the opportunities and the potential for economic growth, and then ultimately population growth within Middlesex Center. Another key driver of growth, which is related to the previous point, is just the outward growth pressure that we're seeing from the City of London. And so when we look at the configuration of Middlesex Center, no surprise, we're surrounding most of the north and west areas of the City of London. And that's having a major impact on the potential demand for housing and population growth, and ultimately net migration within Middlesex Center, particularly in your urban settlement areas and community settlement areas. When we look at the forecast for the City of London, this area is projected to, London and Middlesex County as a whole, the area is projected to grow in the latest Ministry of Finance forecasts by about 190,000 people over the next 25 years. The forecast has been updated several times, about 4 times since 2017 by the Ministry of Finance. And so that higher rate of growth continues to create, again, further outward growth pressure for areas in Middlesex Center, largely for those that are looking for grade-related housing opportunities that may not be as competitively priced or available within the City of London. It's also important to look at the local economic trends that are happening and the regional trends. The impacts of COVID have been significant, there's no doubt, on the regional economy. I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but I would like to just highlight a couple of things. One is that, as you're aware, COVID has been acting as a near-term and potentially more medium-term driver of demand for residential development within Ontario, and this area of the province is no exception. We've seen a large ramp up of building permit activity and demand for housing in Middlesex Center and beyond. We don't expect this trend is going to subside rapidly. We think that this is a new trajectory that we are looking at over the longer term. We would caution not to overstate the potential of COVID, that eventually we would see longer term migration rates in the province stabilize back to a more normalized level, and so would that outward growth pressure to some extent. But we do see the upward trajectory that we're on continuing. And again, it's important to recognize that this upward trajectory was occurring well before the impacts of COVID. We saw significant changes that were starting to occur in the economy and the growth patterns in this area, starting around 2014 and 15. We'd also note that the area has a strategic advantage given its location along the 401 and 402 corridor. And I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail as we get further along in the employment forecast. Also important to note that there are two urban settlement areas as well as two community settlement areas that we see all having potential for population, housing, and employment growth. And the official plan does recognize these areas as the key areas for focus for growth. And lastly, the area does have a significant opportunity for further growth in the agricultural sector. And as Matt mentioned, we see opportunities to also deepen this potential through value-added opportunities in the agriculture and tourism sector. In terms of the other drivers, a couple of things that I wanted to also point out is just the overall potential for net migration in the 55 plus age group. This has been a key age group that has been attractive to Middlesex Centre with respect to migration from other parts of the province, including the GTA and outer ring of the GGH and the City of London. This driver is really both a driver and a disruptor. It provides a source of net migration, but as the population ages, it also puts more pressure on additional net migration to sustain that growth, because population growth from natural increase starts to diminish as the population ages. And this age group, particularly the older component of the 55 plus group, really in that 75 plus age group, will be the fastest growing population segment within the municipality. And that has significant implications for housing needs over the long term. It's also important to consider the potential in attracting millennials and younger age groups. We do see this area being attractive to those younger population age segments. And that's anticipated to continue to drive a range of housing options, most notably related to grade-related ownership housing and also high-density rental housing. Quality of life is also a key soft factor that's becoming increasingly important when looking at the location decisions of both residents and businesses. So, and also a key driver to note. Moving on with the forecast, I just wanted to start off with just looking at the building permit activity over the last about 12 years or so. As I mentioned, building permit activity for residential development has been steadily increasing. And as I mentioned, you can see that that increase was on an uptick starting in 2011. We saw some further acceleration around 2015, 16. And you can see in the last couple of years, we've really been accelerating and seeing more variety of housing coming through the permit activity as well. We're seeing more evidence of medium density activity, and we would expect to see that trend continue over the long term. So in terms of the three forecasts that we prepared for Middlesex Centre, the high scenario, the one that we're recommending, you can see here, shows just about a doubling of population over the next 25 years, or from 2016 to 46, I should say, it would be showing a doubling to about from about 18,000 to about 36,000. That represents a growth rate annually of about 2.3%. That is a high growth rate. It's relatively one of the higher growth rates for a municipality in Ontario. It would reflect an average growth rate more comparable to, say, the city of Barrie, maybe not quite as high as the town of Milton, but definitely would be in the higher range of long-term growth. In terms of the allocations, Matt's provided a bit of detail on that. I'm not going to go into too much more detail today, given the time, but I did want to point out that we have looked at a number of factors to help analyze and ultimately direct where growth should be occurring at the settlement area level. One of the factors that we looked at was the supply of housing. I also mentioned demand and locational influence as well. You can see here in terms of the supply of housing that a large share of the supply of housing in active plans of subdivision or designated residential lands are located in Kilworth, just about almost 80%. The rest being allocated between Ilderton, Delaware, and Arva. So in terms of the overall amount of housing growth that we've identified for Middlesex Centre, this graph here shows the forecast of growth by structure type, so low density, medium density, and high density housing in 5-year increments from 2016 to 2046. We're projecting an average annual rate of housing growth of about 188 units a year, so just under 200 units. That's more than double the amount of housing growth we've been experiencing historically from 2001 to 2016. You can see in terms of the structure type of housing, the majority of that growth is anticipated to be low density housing forms, so singles and semis, but we would expect to see more medium density and high density housing moving forward. And that's largely as a result of housing appreciation and declining affordability, but also the needs to accommodate an aging population, as well as a younger population as well that would require other forms of housing other than just single detached or semi-detached units. About 80% of the overall housing forecast has been allocated to Kilworth and Ilderton, and about 15% to Arva and Delaware, and then the remaining 5% to the rural area. This is a summary of the employment forecast over the long term. We are projecting, as I mentioned, about 6,000 jobs over that time period. The line graph shows the employment activity rate. So this is the ratio of jobs to population. And it just gives us an overall indication of the overall relative balance between employment and population. You can see over the long term, the activity rate is projected to maintain relatively stable. This is a result of two things. One, the population is growing at a very fast rate. So in order for the activity rate to stay stable or grow or increase, employment would have to grow at a faster rate than population. We're projecting a comparable rate. You also have an aging population and labor force, which puts downward pressure on labor force participation. So it's hard to see an example where the employment activity rate would be increasing over time in those circumstances. So we feel this is an appropriate level of employment relative to population growth. In terms of the employment by sector, there's a lot of material here to digest, but what I wanted to point out was that we do see opportunities across a diverse range of employment sectors. We particularly see more opportunity in the industrial sector moving forward than what Middlesex Centres had in the past. And that opportunity is, again, really a factor of the strategic location of the municipality along the 401 and 402 corridor. We see significant opportunity to accommodate steady industrial and commercial development activity along this corridor, particularly in sectors related to manufacturing, food processing, clean tech, construction, utilities, transportation and warehousing, as well as professional and scientific services. So over the long term, we do expect to see more growth in those export-based sectors, as well as growth in population-related sectors like commercial, institutional, and retail, as well as work at home, largely as a result of the increased population growth. So just quickly moving on to the urban land needs. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this because it was mentioned through Matt's presentation. We have conducted a detailed analysis of the urban land requirements in accordance with the growth forecasts that I just summarized. We are identifying an overall land need by 2046 of about 89 gross hectares. As Matt mentioned, that would not include additional land that would be need to be set aside for or identified for environmental features or major infrastructure like a provincial highway corridor, for example. I do note there's a typo here. The Kilworth number should be 27. We are noticing a moderate surplus of urban land designated in Kilworth. However, we do see shortfalls occurring in Ilderton and Arva over the long term, totaling about 116 hectares. And I'll note that these overall land use do need to be rationalized within the broader context of Middlesex County. The provincial policy statement does provide specific direction on the need to look at urban land requirements within the regional market area, which is typically defined as the upper tier municipality. And I'll have one more slide at the end that just want to further touch on that point before I end. With respect to the employment land needs analysis, we have identified a need of about 153 hectares of additional land that would be required to accommodate an employment area expansion within the municipality over the 2021 to 46 period. We are also working on an employment area expansion analysis as a separate component that's also supplementing the official plan review. And the results of that work show that the most logical area for urban expansion of the employment area would be in the area south of Delaware along the 402 corridor. So we have identified a preferred location for an employment area expansion to occur over the fullness of time. We do know that further studies would need to be undertaken to address more detailed servicing impacts, as well as agricultural impacts, as well as potential fiscal impacts to the municipality. There's also a small deficit that we've identified in Arva as well, of about 4 hectares to reach that total of 153 hectares. So again, just want to leave you with the final point of the need for on the residential land needs analysis for this to be further rationalized within the context of the broader regional market area. So we are recommending that further consultation is conducted with the municipality and the county to identify through the county's official plan work where the needs are for urban lands over the long term at a county-wide level, and to further rationalize those surpluses and shortfalls at the county-wide level before any further work is done to identify urban expansion on the residential side of the work. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to turn it back over to council for questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Jamie. I'm going to now turn to council, and I don't know where to start. Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Councillor Shipley. Start it off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a little clarification on the WSP report, or WSP and Watts. WSP is page, sorry, I don't have the page number on this. Growth forecast, Kilworth 58, Lurton 21, Arva 7, Delaware 7, other hamlet areas 7. However, Watson report is different than that. 4% Arva, 7% Delaware, 14% Lurton, 76 Kilworth. Can somebody just explain why there's so much difference in that?
Who wants to?
I can, through you, Madam Chair, I can start with that question. I believe I didn't provide any specific numbers in my presentation on the demand forecast by municipality. I only provided a summary of the supply. I believe you quoted a number of around 7 or 8% of growth for Arva, and that would be the number that we have identified in terms of the demand forecast. But we do note that there's only about 227 units that are identified in the supply. And that's one of the reasons why we've identified a need for potentially for long-term expansion in Arva to account for that shortfall.
Okay, thank you.
I was Councillor Scott, you had your hand up, and I'm going to ask you to go, and then we'll go to Councillor Arts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first of all, I'd like to say thanks to all the residents and people that put letters and comments in. There was a lot of them in the last couple of days, and they were actually very helpful. So I'd like to basically make some comments, and then I do have a couple questions that I'll maybe summarize with. I want to start by saying that everything in this process for me, and I'm speaking specifically of Delaware, really went sideways at our last public meeting. When I was done with the last public meeting, which I think was a 3 weeks ago, you know, I was listening to everything, and the conclusion was that we're not going to do any land expansion. So I got thinking about the process, and I thought, so did we do this backwards? I mean, we went out and asked all the people to suggest if they want their properties involved. We talked to landowners, and we had numerous people reach out to me and put their land up for consideration. And we did this for about 1.5 years. And then we came back, you know, with you guys come back and suggested that we don't need any expansion. So I'm thinking, like, shouldn't we have come up with that first and said, hey, we don't need any land, so let's not bother people and ask for it because we're not giving it out anyway. I don't agree with the fact that we don't need any land, and I'm speaking specifically for Delaware. You know, we're in the biggest boom of the century right now with things that are happening, and Delaware specifically has been in limbo since 2008. So we're 13 years later, it comes back with a suggestion to wait 5 more years. And I can't settle on that and be happy with that. I think Delaware's ripe and ready. And we have local developers that live right in the community that are looking to bring housing and developments to Delaware and Kamoka. And, you know, we've asked for their suggestions. They put stuff in. I've seen some of the extensive plans, and they've done a lot of work on this, you know, to help invest in the community. And now we're saying, no, we're not interested. We're going to wait for 5 years. And as I said, we got the biggest boom going on right now. So I think that's wrong. And then I'm just, with all this information that's coming into me right now, I'm really feeling lost in this process and feel like I'm not well enough informed to make any decisions on approving this in the next couple of weeks. I think things went wrong, and I don't want to point fingers at anybody. I just want to very respectfully say that for me, we need to go back to the drawing board and look at this, specifically Delaware area, the growth. You know, a couple of the questions I had is, how did we determine the growth should go to Kilworth and Kamoka, or Ilderton or Arva? And I know the answer is always, well, they got sewers there. And I understand that, but we've always had direction, and they've been telling Delaware we're going to get sewers. We should plan it. We've been charging people $11,000 per lot to put away money for sewers for any infilling that's going on, and now we're saying let's wait 5 more years. So I can't be happy with that, and I don't really want to accept it. With like I said, with all due respect to the work that's been done, I think we took the wrong direction somewhere along the line. And so yeah, that's basically some of my comments. I feel like a lot of the people that put proposals out there, as far as I know, and council, like, we never got to see any of those proposals. Personally, I think that maybe we should have been involved in that a little bit more so that we could have some direction, because maybe it was our fault we didn't give the right direction that we were looking for. And, you know, so like I said, I'm not here to point fingers, but one thing I can say is this process is a very costly process, and to have a status quo and you know, and move on with it the way it is, I can't accept that. So anyway, I'm going to probably end there. I just wanted to make those comments kind of clear. I know the report looks for 398 units that are in progress or going to be in Delaware. And I have no idea. I live in Delaware. There's nowhere there's 398 lots available to build on right now, or ever, without some sort of sewer system put in place. So I'm not sure where those kind of numbers come from. So I'm seeing a lot of discrepancies too. Some of the percentages, you know, that were pointed out to me, it looks like Arva's, in a percentage-wise, Arva's got the highest percent of growth planned. And I've got charts I can show you there. But like I said, there's been lots of comments, and I think we need to sit down and really go back and have some real good, clear direction, like I said, from ourselves as council, and go from there. So anyway, I can ask and hope that some of the other councillors are feeling similar and can support me on this. Again, if we're going to spend this kind of money, I really want to get it done right. And I think it's time to do it, to move forward. We can't wait another 5 years. It's no good. We're going to miss the boat. Strathroy Mountain bridges are growing leaps and bounds beside us, and we're losing out, and I just don't understand why. So thank you for letting me comment, Madam Mayor, and I don't want to rant on because I know lots of people want to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And I've got Councillor Arts and then Councillor Cates.
Excuse me. Through your Madam Mayor, I echo a lot of Councillor Scott's opinions. Like, we've been stringing Delaware on for 20 years. This report, we're going to do something about it. If it takes whatever, like I said, it's just dragged on too long. And as far as the surplus farm dwelling severance policies, what's proposed is nowhere near rectifying some of the problems that we've had on council with it. So there's got to be a lot done to that. Like, first off, there should be the 2 acre max. You took away the age of the house. I would say put a 25-year minimum age, so that the policy always keeps updating. As far as principal residence and the severed residence, I know that you want them to both be habitable, but reading this, I really can't see where it's in there. And the principal residence should also be a farming operation. We've had cases where they can live in town and say it's their principal and have a surplus farm dwelling. So like I said, that one needs a lot of work. And I do appreciate what you put in. I know it's not an easy process. Thank you.
And Councillor Cates and then Councillor Heffernan.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I have lots of comments. But first I want to ask a question before I start, because Jamie said something that just kind of twigged me to something in figuring out all of this growth in Kamoka-Kilworth. I don't want it to be all intensification growth or, anyways, you said something about, I just want you to clarify for me, please. When you look at I took it as when you look at the land available in Kamoka, that you aren't factoring in various types of that land. So, sorry, I don't know the right term that you said. So for example, are you not factoring in all the ponds that we have from gravel pits?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So when we conduct the land needs analysis, we look at all the lands that are designated within the urban settlement area so when we're looking at residential, we're looking at all the lands that are designated for residential development. And then within those residentially designated areas, you have non-developable areas or no touch areas. You've got natural heritage, environmental features. You also have local infrastructure that's already exists today, like major roads. You mentioned also other features like aggregate pits that could be within a residentially designated area. Most of that would not be. Most of that would be outside of the residentially designated area in the rural area. But any non-developable feature would be looked at, as well as a provision for local infrastructure, as well as things like stormwater management, and also provisions for for developable lands that are not going to accommodate housing, like areas that will accommodate commercial or mixed-use development or schools. Those are also all factored into the analysis to get down to a net developable land area. So that has been factored in looking at the overall need for growth.
Thank you. Okay, so where do I begin? I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you all my thoughts now and maybe have some questions after everybody else has spoke, but Brad did it, so I'm going to do it too. Hopefully that's okay. I also echo what Brad has said. I feel like this is too modest. We have, really a housing crisis, such high demand, such high need. And I feel that this is just too modest in growth. I think that, as Brad said, all of the input that we received, and yesterday we received 13 more letters, and in reading it all, there is some extremely valid input, and so many professional planners, etc. And I think that there needs to be time to truly know that we've reviewed all of that, and how could it fit, etc. I've written a lot of these notes over the last few days, and in reviewing everything. But then today, no offense intended at all, and thank you for all your hard work. But when I'm already feeling this way, and then I hear words like it's sufficient and it's adequate, it's moderate, that just echoes the concerns that I have for this being too modest in growth. I also agree. I think some things just keep getting deferred and deferred and deferred, and we need to have. And I'm more going to speak of Delaware than ARVA, but I know that the same applies for ARVA. But Delaware sits over there deadlocked. We've already talked about, and you mentioned the employment lands, the 401, the 402, and yet we're deadlocking that without the services. And we stand by and we watch people head to Mount Bridges, keep going, and straight out of our municipality. And I think that the time is now. We're making these, very critical decisions for the next 25 years, even if it's, 5 to 15 numbers you're saying, but for the next 25 years, and we can't let this happen again. Some things, we talk about, we need to ensure a 15-year supply. And I'm confused at also some of the numbers. We have, for example, if we look at rounding it 270 building permits in 2020, we multiply that out for 25 years, 6,750. That's not even allowing for any additional growth. But if I understand this correctly, we have 4,600 things in the queue. That's only 2,150 new homes for the next 25 years. So there's a lot of conflict in the numbers. When you take, I think it's your slide 15 from WSP, I believe it is, when you actually do the percentage of increase on those numbers, it has ARVA at 280% and Kamoka at 239%, and Delaware at 69%. So again, ARVA and Delaware aren't getting the services at this point, but they have even higher numbers than Kamoka. So there's just some things that don't really jive. We also, Jamie mentioned the 6,000 jobs over 25 years. Great to see, the opportunity for employment lands, et cetera. But we also have to think, if we go back to that 4,600 in the queue, we need to ensure 15-year supply. And we've only got 2,150, but now we're going to have 6,000 new jobs. It's just all not making sense on it. Again, with it being too moderate. Sorry, I have so many notes. I think that it's, now is the time to get it right. And I think that we need more time to look further at this. I think that there is a lot of additional opportunities out there, and that we can do better, and we can do more to help with the housing crisis that we have. I really don't feel that if we expanded this too much, that we would have a problem versus if we didn't expand it enough. So, I'd certainly hate for us to get this wrong now, and I think that we need to really look closely at it. I have more notes, but I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
You can come back again. Councillor Heffernan, do you want to take it away?
Thank you through the mayor. First of all, I agree with Councillor Arts in regard to the surplus farm residents. So I also have a few comments here. So according to the PPS and the county plan and our own plan, agricultural land is considered of primary importance. And I know that that's the only place where development can go, really, because in Ilderton, for example, in the last 20 to 25 years, our population has grown tenfold, and about 300 to 400 acres of prime actively farmed land was developed. And we have a couple of individuals who are pushing to expand that even more. Intensification, I know that is, I think, as I've mentioned before, like sometimes it seems as though developers are looking strictly at a townhouse complex or condo complex, as opposed to, integrating some of these types of intensification within a subdivision. So instead of just having individual houses on a street, you can intensify by having, a low rise apartment building, or perhaps 4 or 5 townhouses in a row, couple, some duplexes, which other than some townhouse complexes, we don't have any of that coming up in Ilderton. As far as the growth is concerned, I do agree that Delaware is prime for that. So I just have a question. The land that you're saying that we have available for 25 years, is that has already been designated but not necessarily developed? Or in the 5-year forecast, for example, that's in draft plan, if I understand. And then, so what do we have in addition to that? I think I'm making it exactly clear, but so as of today, do we have enough land to fulfill our requirements for 5 years? We have enough land designated for 5 years. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, Jamie might be able to speak in more detail to this, but yes, my understanding is that for the next 5 years, there is sufficient land that is designated and can be built on to accommodate the first 5 years. I would also clarify that just in response to some of the previous comments, we are saying that there is a need to expand the settlement areas to accommodate growth over the entire life of the plan, over the next 25 years. That is part of our presentation and our recommendation. We are acknowledging that there is a need for that. We do expect that much growth to occur. The policy issue that we run into is related to servicing. And so the thing that unlocks the ability to approve that much growth, that expansion, is the provision of servicing. But to take it back to the question about the existing designated lands, Jamie might be able to talk a bit more about where that assessment comes from.
So thanks, Matt. To you, Madam Mayor. So just to build on that, so just to be clear, when we're looking at the supply, we're looking at really 3 components. One is the supply an active development application, so registered plans that have unbuilt units, draft approved plans, or other plans that are pending approval. And we also have other lands that are designated for residential development that have been identified as available and developable within the designated urban settlement area boundaries of Kilmacreek-Kilworth, Ilderton, Arva, and Delaware. Lastly, we have also identified an intensification provision as well, a moderate provision for additional intensification. So all those three components ultimately provide opportunity, supply opportunity for growth. And over the next 15 years, as Matt's pointed out, we do have sufficient land. According to the supply analysis, we have sufficient land to accommodate the demand overall in the municipality.
So going back to the servicing, I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but so basically, for example, in Ilderton, we have a very small creek that the sanitary sewer plant enters or flows into. So at what point can a creek, a creek, river, whatever, when are they at capacity for the effluent that is being discharged into them?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not able to speak to the specifics of that in that area. The municipal engineer should may be able to give you a response if they're on the line.
The other thing, though, is that the servicing is holding up development in Delaware, for example. The servicing costs a lot of money, and if we were to pay for that upfront, which we generally do, that's the method, is to collect then from development charges. But that puts us in a position where we may not be able to do other things in the municipality. So I think that's one of the blocks is the cost of the servicing. And if any of the developers want to pay for that, that's fine with me. But I think that's the biggest holding block is that. And again, further development has to depend on what you can put in sanitary sewer. Like there's got to be a, expansion. I know you can add capacity, but the one other thing I wanted to mention is, do you see a slowdown in potential residences when interest rates go up, such as happened in the 80s? The regular interest rate then was like 10%. And then when they shot up to 20, everybody lost their shirt because they couldn't afford to pay their renewing mortgages. In today's world, our interest rates are extremely low, but so even if they go up, given the price of houses, even if they go up 1 or 2%, that's huge. I'm just thinking that the growth may not be as high as you think, as high as you project, given the economic situation, financial situation. That's pretty much it.
We're just waiting for our engineer
okay.
to come on, and while we wait for that, I just want to build on a question that we may want answered. So the projections, for example, you were talking, I think, about 116 hectares in the Ilderton Arva together. I'm not sure of the number there, but the numbers that we have projected for Ilderton, for example, are those projected based on the capacity right now, or does that assume the capacity has to be expanded there? I think that's kind of where you were going with that, with respect to what's there now and what the capacity is. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in or if Rob wants to take that. I see you're there now. Take it away, Rob. It's yours.
Yeah, hi, through you, Madam Mayor. So maybe I'll jump in on the Ilderton question first, and you can correct me if I didn't catch the whole question. I think Councillor Heffernan's question was regarding the capacity of the existing treatment facility and of the existing creek that takes the outflow from that facility. So absolutely, every water course would have a simulation capacity. That's a study that would be completed. The existing facility does have a current EA on it that allows for an additional expansion. So that assimilative capacity would have been considered. So there is at least the ability to have another further expansion over and above what's there currently. Beyond that, we would have to go back and look at that again and see whether future expansions were still viable. There is, in all likelihood, the ability to change technology if that was a need to increase the ability for future growth into such a small water course as well. There's two different components. There's the assimilative capacity, and then there's the hydraulic capacity of the creek as well. So the hydraulic capacity would be something that would have to be reviewed with both the sanitary outlet as well as stormwater as growth occurs. So, and I think your other question was regarding the population numbers. That I might let Matt address, but my guess is that that the numbers that they propose have assumed that the increases in capacity at the facility would be provided as required.
Matt, did you want to jump in?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The assumption with Ilderton is that the ability to accommodate the forecast growth in Ilderton exists with servicing that's there. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks. Did you want to continue with your list, Councillor?
Thanks, Rob and Matt. I just wanted to confirm that we do have, so the capacity of the sanitary system right now is sufficient to handle the two subdivisions that are underway. But if we expand it into, like, we're supposed to be doubling by 2046, doubling our population, there's where we could have an issue if these studies come back and say, no, we can't do that. Is that sort of it?
Yes. So through Madam Mayor, I'll just say, so the existing facilities are there. That's correct, that they have capacity for the current draft plan approved subdivisions. There is an EA that will allow for a future expansion already. So that will accommodate at least a portion of that future growth, and maybe all. I'd have to look at the numbers more carefully. And then beyond that, we would have to look at an additional EA for further expansion and look at the creek as part of that again.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Arts.
Through your Madam Mayor, I'd like just to maybe expand a bit on more what Debbie said too, because I know we've got some communities where we got stormwater issues, because when you have a big rain and the sewage plant runs over capacity, you know what's going on, that water's not going where it's supposed to go. So I guess we have all these charts and they look great, but I don't see a chart where are we gaining or losing when we expand, like the increase in servicing and the costs and asset management. If we add 100 houses, are we actually getting ahead or are we actually getting behind? I think that's a question that has to be asked, because growth sounds great, but growth and losing money, it doesn't sound very good to me. So somewhere along the line, we got to do an analysis of if it's worth it, I guess. Thank you.
Councillor Cates.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, just a couple of additional comments. I think that I already mentioned all of the input that's being provided, and I'm sure some of these people are going to speak, but I just wanted to reiterate that what I'm saying is that there's many opportunities that does not take away farmland for us to expand our boundaries. And we have it's like we need to step back and look at, analyze, well, they'd like to do this and they'd like to do this, and sort of chart it out, and no and yes and all of this. And again, my concern is that we're far too moderate. Is, in my personal opinion, as far as the interest rates go, I think that it's only going to be small little increases. I think at this time there is still such a need for, there's so much need for people for housing from all different ages and coming from other areas and immigration and all of those things that we're going to have a need for a very long time. And I think that by also, like build it and they will come, it's going to help with the craziness in the real estate market with prices being so high and multiple offers and all of that situation. I think that it shows some form of relief there for it. And I'm sure that all of the developers and the experts, they're all analyzing the situation as well. And if the time is right, then how do we ignore that? Thank you.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor.
I think what we're hearing, and if I agree with what my fellow councilors are saying, I think the growth estimates and how we deal with that comes down to intensification within the boundary areas now to stop them from expanding, but to intensify, whether it's townhouses or low-rise apartment buildings. I think our concerns are there about the amount of growth we're going to have. I think when you start adding apartment buildings, townhouses, a lot of people live in those buildings. And I think the growth expectations could be significantly higher than what you're projecting if we intensify and keep our boundaries relatively where they are now and start building these multiple residents within the hamlet zoning. So I think that's a huge concern of what we're going to be dealing with. And I don't think it's been properly addressed through your growth expectations. And the surplus farm dwellings, I was looking more for some justification who could actually sever those. We're seeing people severing surplus farm houses, developers buying multiple farms and selling them. This was brought in to assist the farming community to dispose of surplus residences that they didn't require in their farming business. And we've now seen it expanded as a developer-driven thing. And we have companies with multiple owners buying properties and severing houses. And I don't think that was the intent of the policy. And I don't think there's been enough changes in there to tighten that up, that what it was intended for. So those are a couple of the main issues that I have with it.
And I know Councillor Scott would like to say a few words again. Go ahead, Brad.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment and a couple of questions. With that much growth in Kamoka and Kilworth, I'm not sure what everybody else feels, but I mean, this is why I say if we can alleviate some of that growth and move it over to Delaware. I personally don't think I want to see tall apartment buildings in Kamoka and Kilworth, because if we're trying to keep it a rural community, maybe a 3-story, 4 stories would be more than sufficient. And then this way we can move some of this, like I said, some of that 58% growth towards Delaware. As I said, that's ripe and ready. So one question I have for Matt is, you mentioned that policy is in the way to allow us to expand Delaware. So I'm assuming that something in the policy says that we can't do it because we don't have infrastructure. So if we've got willing investors and developers that are willing to take care of that problem, why could we not dedicate it now and give them the strength they need to feel assured that their investment is going to make it worthwhile? I mean, we can't ask them to put money in the pot and say, well, maybe we'll do it. I mean, is there any way that we can get that policy changed to address that? And then my second question would be to Rob. Is there room right now in the Kamoka wastewater plant to take on Delaware? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Matt, do you want to take the first one and then Rob can take the second one?
Yes. So the policy obstacle that I mentioned, the provincial policy statement has sort of a 3-tier hierarchy of servicing that needs to be followed. The first priority is that development be permitted only on municipal sewer and water. The second tier is if municipal sewer and water does not exist, is not planned, or is not feasible, then development may proceed through private communal servicing, which I know is a proposal that some landowners have put forward. We've received comments to that effect. The issue in Delaware is that full municipal services are planned. They are feasible, but they don't exist yet. And the planning of those services has not progressed to a point where we'd be able to identify some lands and state how they would be serviced, because the pipes aren't in the ground, or the size of the facility hasn't been nailed down yet, to my understanding. Rob might be able to comment further on that. But what can happen, so developers, landowners can contribute financially to that expansion. The growth management work that Jamie has done and the conceptual, basically the policies and the conceptual future expansion area that we're proposing through this official plan will help to size what those facilities would be. So until Jamie's work was complete, you didn't have something that said precisely or with an up-to-date forecast of how many people would need to be serviced through that facility for Delaware. Now you have these numbers, but now there's engineering work to be done to determine exactly how that is going to be serviced. If a landowner wants to contribute financially to that, I believe there are options available to the municipality to enter into cost-sharing agreements. There may be, I believe your earlier comments referenced a levy that residents have been paying already. So that's another financial means of sharing that cost. So paying for it is not restricted by the policies, but the only issue, the only reason why I'm saying that it may take another 5 years until the next official plan update to be able to actually change the lines on the map and technically expand the settlement area is simply that exercise of saying there is a facility that exists that has capacity for so many residents and dwellings, and that is how those lands will be serviced. To more specifically to your question about what's preventing the municipality from expanding on the basis that the developer will pay for it, that would require some kind of agreement with that developer. If the expansion happens and the developer decides they're going to sell the land and the next buyer doesn't want to do it, then you're stuck with this expansion that you can't service. So these are the sort of tricky give and take that has to happen. It really is, it is frustrating because it has that appearance of like a chicken and egg situation. How can you expand if you don't have the services? How can you build the services if you haven't justified the expansion? But the work that Jamie has done is a crucial element to establishing what those services are going to look like so that we can say that's how it's going to be serviced. We are working towards this target of having this official plan update completed by the end of this year. If there was a desire to push that back until all of that other work is done, that can happen. I don't necessarily recommend that because there are a lot of other policy changes that aren't specific to the settlement area's boundaries that I think are necessary and should be made. But if you think about it as a two-phase process, that might be one way of looking at it, where we have sort of a policy update now and that settlement expansion process, that settlement expansion phase once the servicing is all resolved. If you think about it in those terms, I think it could make some more sense. I hope that clarifies it. It really is like I said, it has the appearance of a chicken and egg thing, but it's really about having all the information you need and all the right plans in place before you draw the line on the map.
Rob, did you want to comment?
Or I'll jump in. So through Madam Mayor, Councillor Scott, yeah, the chicken and egg analogy has been used several times, and I think it's a good one in this case. But your question specifically to the Komoka wastewater treatment facility, so it currently does have excess capacity, but we know there's development in Komoka Kilworth that is still coming online. And so if we were to service Delaware with the existing facility, we would, I believe if I looked at the projections, that we would run short of capacity for the projects or the development parcels that are already further advanced than what Delaware currently is. So there will be a need for a future expansion of Komoka again to facilitate further expansion.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, last question. I want to get to the, I know we're going to have a lot more questions. So if you want to ask, are you sure? Till we, okay. We have a number of people who are waiting on public delegations to want to speak. And I'm just being mindful of the time. We could probably ask questions again if we want. So let's get going with the first one. Yeah. Okay, so Stephen Stapleton from Auburn Developments is the first speaker registered. And each of these people will be speaking for 10 minutes and then we'll be moving on. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Just gonna follow up on the letter that we did submit and thank Council again for the opportunity to participate in this official plan. What I've heard today from the councillors mostly is points that I also agree with. I think that we are in a housing crisis, whether you're in Middlesex Centre, London, or anywhere in Ontario, and we need to deal with that. The process that I heard from the consultants today does support an expansion in ARVA, and that's the interest that I have. Our lands are included as a future expansion area in ARVA, and we thank everyone for that recognition. We do believe that the consultants, both Watson and WSP, have also identified the housing needs for the area, and that we will need more land in ARVA particularly. The policy context, they're having it as the future expansion, and we have to wait till the next comprehensive review to have it included in the settlement boundary. I believe that's difficult, and I think we need to adjust that and have it included in the urban settlement boundary so that we can participate and assist the municipality. I know some members of council talked about funding certain things, and we're prepared to do that if we're included in the growth boundary, because then we have certainty in process that this is something that's going to happen. The justification has been provided by the consultants. We don't see any reason to wait for the next comprehensive review. I think the policy structure could be revised to incorporate the necessity of the outcome of the EAs and servicing for the areas. And I think Delaware's future expansion areas is probably similar to ours, that certainty is needed so that we can start the planning process, start the background reports so that we can meet the housing need in the timeframes anticipated in this official plan. So I think most of these future expansion areas have been well identified as growth areas. We just need to make that next step so we don't wait 5 years for no reason to include these lands for development. I went further on with my letter on the rationale for that. Happy to answer any questions or provide any other clarification that council may need. But in essence, what we're asking for is the future expansion area to be called a future development area. And then those lands be included in the settlement boundary so that we can be considered in the current class environmental assessment for servicing and the policies to allow for the advancement of development applications. And so we can provide the housing that this municipality is well positioned to attract. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stapleton. Next up, we have Mr. Banman, Jim Banman from Cirrus Developments.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. The floor is yours, Mr. Banman.
Okay, thank you. Mayor DeVete, council and staff, I'm Jim Banman from Cirrus Developments. And first off, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation and support for the recommendation that our lands be included in the future expansion area as proposed in the draft plan. I have lived in Delaware for 25 years now. This community has a lot of great features. It make it a wonderful place to live and work. And the proximity to 400 series highways and London makes it extremely convenient as well. Residential development has been constrained in Delaware for many years. So I have copies of letters dating back 25 years that outline Delaware's intentions to install sanitary services back then. The lack of public sanitary servicing is an obstacle preventing internal lands from being developed. The Watson report indicates that additional residential development lands are needed within Middlesex Center. The proposed official plan, however, calls for no new lands to be included. Delaware has had no boundary expansions for the last 2 official plans. It is our understanding that the future expansion overlay is not a commitment to include our lands within the growth boundary during the period of this official plan. It is, however, an expression of interest to consider these lands in the future official plan and to keep the dialogue moving forward. I am concerned that continued delay to include these lands into the settlement boundary will continue to delay servicing that has been planned for Delaware for decades. Existing undeveloped parcels in the community are not of sufficient size to yield a return on any necessary investment to provide services. And then this lack of servicing then stands in the way of development and the cycle continues. The proposed future expansion overlay acknowledges that our 89-acre parcel provides the location, the features, and the scale to justify the public servicing. This servicing is key to unlocking Delaware, as we've heard today. Designated lands within the community that have been sterilized from development for years could be open and available for effective land use planning. And they would not need private septic systems, which take up more land. Master servicing studies were completed for Delaware back in 2009 with plans for sanitary servicing for the community. And the latest 2021 DC study identifies funding for a pump station and a force main for Delaware by 2026. We understand that it takes a partnership between private and public sectors to grow communities. Cirrus Developments has demonstrated willingness to participate in this process and financial investments required. Throughout this process, I've personally expressed our intentions to help fund the sanitary servicing for Delaware. We have also completed our own servicing studies during this process for Delaware and submitted them to staff and council for review. 2 viable options were proposed: a private treatment plant that could eventually service all of Delaware, and sanitary sewer force main from Delaware to the Kamoka treatment plant with the associated pump station required. Cirrus Developments is again publicly offering to help fund sanitary servicing for Delaware as it makes sense. A recent London Free Press article stated that the average home prices in Middlesex Center is now $1 million. The new head of CMHC indicates that the best way to combat soaring housing prices is to build more houses. We strongly believe that now is the right time to invest. And I respectfully request that council consider expanding the Delaware settlement area boundary to include our 89-acre parcel. This would provide the municipality and Cirrus Developments with greater certainty to make the significant investments required. And I do acknowledge the hard work of Mr. DeLulo and staff and all the consultants in this process, and for their recognition that Delaware can play a meaningful role to provide much needed housing within the municipality. We remain committed to working with you and the local development community to unlock Delaware. And at this time, I can turn it over to Jay, who may be joining us as well.
We have another speaker on this file. No?
Jay McGuffin from Monteith Brown Planning and Consulting.
We could move forward. He has registered to speak about 3 or 4 more down.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, he's there. Okay.
Hi, good morning, Your Worship, members of council. Thank you for hearing me today. Thank you, Jim, for your presentation as well. Jim's asked me to say a few words from a technical perspective in our review of the growth analysis and the draft official plan that has been provided by the consultants. And we do recognize all of the hard work that has been completed, and just want to make sure council is fully aware in terms of some of the comments that were received through the public process about the development community's contributions to the process and planning aspects. Similar to the work that we did when the Ilderton settlement area boundary was expanded through the last process in official plan amendment number 28, we assisted Mr. Banman in assembling a development review team. So between ourselves and Dillon Consultants, we went in and analyzed Mr. Banman's property in terms of a spatial location, a land use perspective, the integration of those lands into the community and what made sense, looking at the population distribution, looking at what is constraining growth and development in Delaware, and then looking at opportunities to advance servicing. As a result of that work, we identified that there were 2 options. One would be a privately initiated option in providing a package servicing plant. We were perfectly allocated within the community, geographically speaking, to be able to provide that facility with an appropriate outlet. And by doing so on a private initiation perspective, that could be turned over to the municipality and serve as a municipal sewage treatment facility that could be tapped into and unlock the rest of the development lands within the Delaware community. Our client also identified that he was more than willing and able to step forward in a front-ending agreement to personally fund the required servicing of the extension of public services into Delaware to achieve the same goal. That information, together with a bunch of other supporting information, analysis on things like the Canada Land Inventory for soil capability and taking a look at other planning aspects, were done at a high level and provided through a presentation to the municipality. And all of these submissions have been provided to council in the package that we distributed yesterday as an appendix. So we have been very and deeply involved in this process and monitoring the process throughout. And just have a couple of comments that I'd like to share with council. Many of them council have hit upon. Hopefully I can provide a little bit more detail and information in terms of the genesis of some of those comments, or articulate very clearly why some of these things are and should be a concern to council. So the consultants have projected a need for additional lands in Ilderton and Arva But I find it interesting that they haven't seen a need for lands in Delaware. And they mention that this is policy driven, but it appears that they're dismissing that historical land consumption cannot be used to forecast growth in Delaware because policies currently in Delaware don't permit growth to happen unless they're on full services. So this very much is a chicken and egg scenario. And if we continue to adapt the approach that's been suggested by the consultants, you're never going to get out of the chicken and egg scenario. There needs to be decisions made in policy at the council level in terms of how growth is going to be allocated. And I think that stems back to how much growth has been allocated as a percentage to the various growth areas. Your consultants have identified that not only serviced settlement areas, but settlement areas that are planned for service are among the highest to receive growth. Delaware is planned and has been planned for a very long time to receive services. In fact, we've provided correspondence that indicates that the Ministry of the Environment back in the 1970s indicated that Delaware was to be serviced. There was a suggestion that there had been a continual kicking of the can, so to speak, in terms of the approvals for servicing in Delaware and for the allocation of growth to Delaware. Not all of council may be familiar with Official Plan Amendment number 28. That was the amendment that was undertaken at the time of the last comprehensive review. And it was married with the secondary plan for Kamoka-Kilworth. This was the planning exercise that looked at forming the new community of Kamoka-Kilworth and establishing it as a primary settlement area in the community. A lot of growth was considered for that community. And at that time, that was what was council's decision, was rather than to put eggs in the Delaware basket, that those eggs would be directed toward Kamoka-Kilworth and to some extent to the settlement expansion that occurred in Northeast Ilderton. Well, we're back to the next 5-year review. At that 5-year review, it was identified that at this 5-year review, Delaware would be looked at for that expansion. And Mr. Banman is before you, ready, willing, and able to step up to the plate to finance the servicing solution that council deems appropriate for this property, which will also serve to benefit the rest of the locked lands that exist in Delaware. Policy in Delaware has indicated that only new lots could be created if they fronted on an existing street and serviced privately. Any interior lands could not be developed until services became available. So back to Councillor Scott's comments earlier in terms of we've not seen any growth and development in Delaware. That's why. This truly is chicken and egg. Sorry, just I went off script. One of the major obstacles, as identified by Mr. Banman and Councillor Scott, is that the properties that exist in the development supply of Delaware are not of a sufficient size to get a return on an investment to fund servicing publicly. Mr. Banman represents the largest potential development property in Delaware, which carries with it the land area to absorb the return, the necessary return on the investment into infrastructure, public infrastructure in that community. Our client's land offers that opportunity. In terms of justification, if you cannot justify a boundary adjustment in the highest housing demand crisis that this province has ever seen, then when will it be able to justify it? The consultants are not proposing to change any settlement boundaries. We've already identified that in Mr. Banman's words, we've been given a request for consideration, as you will, or of a letter of intent that you will continue to look at his lands as this process moves forward into subsequent comprehensive reviews. It is our submission, respectfully, that this is the comprehensive review where these lands need to be considered. We need more land to accommodate growth. Restrictions on supply impact raise costs, and is already identified. Middlesex Centre's average housing cost far exceeds that in the City of London at over $1 million. We saw in the presentation that one of the target areas is the attraction of millennial population. Well, how many millennials are there out there that can afford to enter into home ownership at an average cost over $1 million? How many new families just starting out are able to move into Middlesex Centre and to set down roots when the average cost to purchase a home is over $1 million. We've got information from the CMHC that has clearly indicated that one of the major ways and methods to reduce the cost of housing to make it more affordable is to increase the supply of housing. ARVA growth versus Delaware growth in the forecasting. They're forecasting significant growth in ARVA because it's been serviced by sanitary sewers. What we're not talking about is the fact that that servicing is limited, constrained because it's provided by the City of London, and that they cannot get more. Delaware currently has a proponent that is willing to invest but can't, and this scenario just does not make sense.
You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you. I'll end up on, I guess at this point in time, we need more land available to accommodate growth. We're in a housing crisis. What is council and the consultants going to recommend to get Middlesex Center out of that housing crisis? And could you please explain how this proposed official plan amendment and update will address the issue of housing supply and affordability in the context of the information that's been provided? And I'll just lead off with the presentation that was commissioned by the Ontario Home Builders Association by a Ivy School of Business professor, Mike Moffat, at the Smart Prosperity Institute in Ottawa. We had a presentation delivered last week, which identifies a demand for over 1 million homes in the province over the next 10 years, 100,000 annually. And what we're seeing is that demand is occurring in municipalities just like Middlesex Center, where people are having to leave the large urban centers in order to find affordable housing solutions. And it's being driven on changes to immigration policies, and population projection methodologies have not been adjusted to properly account for those changes in immigration policies. And I'd just like to conclude on one comment in terms of the provincial policy statement being a driving policy document in terms of how growth is allocated. I will remind council that the Planning Act itself—
That's your time. Thank you very much, Mr. McGuffin.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Mr. I'm not sure, is it Lunison? Mr. Lunison and Kevin McDougall from Comgord Limited, please.
Good morning, Madam
Good
Mayor,
morning.
members of council. I hope you can hear me. My
You're
name
all
is Jeff
clear.
Ludison. Sorry?
You're clear and ready to go.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Jeff Ludison, and I'm a registered professional planner in Ontario. And I have over 30 years of municipal planning experience. And I'm here representing Comgord Limited, and they own property at 14501 Medway Road. And if I may, I'd like to share my screen because I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words. Uh, 14501 Medway Road, as you can see, is on the south side of Medway Road. It's between Medway High School, Weldon Park, and Burton Ave. It's about 100 acres in size, but it's only about half of it can be used for cash crops. The remainder of it is occupied by a woodlot, and it's bisected by a man-made drain. It's immediately east of Medway High School and Weldon Park. As you can see, to the north is currently an agricultural area and a proposed expansion area. To the south, it's the City of London, and those lands in the City of London are proposed for residential uses. And to the immediate east are a string of estate residential lots and some hazard land. We have reviewed the policy and direction reports, which recommend an increase in population, and we support that. And we also have reviewed and are supportive of the growth management policies that says growth areas should be in close proximity to existing residential uses, that they can accommodate a range of housing types, that they use existing infrastructures, that they don't result in a financial burden on the municipality, that they protect protect agricultural uses, and they accommodate phasing. In our view, the growth management policies constitute sound planning. We also agree that the Arba community settlement area should be enlarged. But currently, the future expansion area doesn't include the Comgore lands. And we believe that they should be included in the expansion area because they satisfy the growth management principles. They're immediately east of the Arba community, immediately east of Medway High School, which may expand in the future, and immediately east of Weldon Park. They can accommodate a mix of housing. They're able to be serviced in a cost-effective manner by extending existing municipal services, including St. John's Drive. The man-made municipal drain, or the man-made drain, and the woodlot easily accommodate phasing, and that also it's not ideal for agricultural uses. If these lands were developed in the future, they would be compatible with existing surrounding uses. To not include these lands in the future expansion area would result in a pocket of agricultural land surrounded by community uses. This would not be sound use planning and could also result in compatibility issues. In conclusion, in our view, the Comgore lands satisfy the policies the draft policies you set out and the draft growth management strategy. Including them in the future expansion area would be in the long-term interest of the community and constitute sound planning. We have attempted to meet with the consultants to understand why these lands weren't included, but have not heard anything as of yet, and we are still looking forward to them. Thank you very much. And now I'll turn it over to Kevin McDougall. He's one of the principals of Comgore Limited.
Kevin, you're on the screen if you'd like to
There you
unmute.
go. Good morning. I'm, as you said, I'm Kevin McDougall, principal of Comgore Limited. I own 14501 Medway Road. As Jeff indicated, we feel our farm is in an excellent position to become part of the planned growth in Arva, Middlesex Center. I believe our property will be part of the settlement growth prior to 2046. As the area around the hamlet will be phased in over the 25-year life of the official plan. Our property is nestled between homes to the east of us, Medway High School to the west. I think a lot of people think our farm is part of Medway Park. We get lots of visitors. Drulo Holdings have a planned subdivision to the south, albeit it's in the city, and of course. The lands that to the north, which Steve Stapleton spoke of, already considered for future growth. As a layman, the extension of the sanitary services would seem simple. The current hamlet sewage is gravity fed to a pumping station in Weldon Park. It seems likely that future expansion of the sewage system and treatment plant would include the current system, and it seems likely that we could be included into that growth very simply as we're next to the park and to the school. I guess simply we would ask you to consider or reconsider your position regarding the growth boundary and include our farm at 14501 Medway Road as part of the future growth. Thank you.
And thank you. Next, we have Matt Campbell from Seneca Priamo for Paisley Hill Incorporated. There we go.
Good afternoon, Mayor DeVitt. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. I don't see you just yet. I see your
Okay.
name though, so you can go ahead if you like that.
There we go. Hopefully we can get that. Sorry, it's a little bit of a lag time to rejoin and enter the meeting. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Matt Campbell, Senior Planner with Zelenka Priamo Limited. We submitted 2 letters, one on behalf of Paisley Hill Limited, one on behalf of Southside. And my comments are going to concern settlement area expansions. I know there's been a lot of discussion already this morning on this anyways. I'm just going to echo the comments that have already been provided predominantly by Councillor Scott and Councillor Cates. We're questioning the process that has been undergone here. And I believe it was as Councillor Scott that mentioned that the municipality had solicited some requests from landowners, and our firm had submitted a couple of those requests on behalf of the landowners I just mentioned, with the intent and the full understanding that through the comprehensive review, these lands would be looked at for settlement area expansions. Now, that would be provided that the land needs assessment justified any sort of settlement area expansion. Well, what has occurred is, again, this chicken and egg issue, wherein the draft official plan was made available well in advance of the draft land needs assessment. And the information that was conveyed to us suggested that because the land needs assessment was not yet available at the time that WSP was conducting their official plan review, therefore no land needs analysis was incorporated into that review. And that was questionable from our perspective. I know that there were some of my colleagues in the land use consulting industry raised questions about that in terms of, well, is that the correct process? And that certainly is not consistent with the direction that was provided by both WSP quite some time ago, well in advance of the draft document coming out, and municipal staff. And we're struggling with this one a little bit simply because it seems as though the scope of work and the intent of the OP update has shifted through the process, and we're not quite sure why exactly that occurred. And I'm questioning whether the conclusions of the official plan update itself would necessarily be the same if the order of operations had changed, meaning that if the land needs assessment was done well in advance of the draft official plan document being presented, I'm wondering if those conclusions would be the same. And I mean, we can certainly speculate as to why this has been presented the way it has, but this is generally not the way things would proceed. Our firm is monitoring a number of other official plan updates for municipalities across Ontario. And again, this analogy of the chicken and egg issue is pretty apt. Typically, the land needs assessment would be done well in advance of providing the draft official plan update. And there would be a robust analysis going into any sort of settlement area expansions. Now, that being said, the conclusions of the land needs assessment do not necessitate that the municipality expand settlement area boundaries at this time. I fully recognize that. However, I'm questioning whether it would make sense for the municipality to do that expansion at this time. So the Watson report concludes that over the 15-year horizon, there's sufficient residential land for the municipality. Well, now that we have the information and we're going through this OP update right now, would it not make sense to go through that analysis and look at these lands that have already submitted requests to be included? rather than, I think that there was another speaker earlier on who mentioned kicking the can down the road to another analysis and another official plan update, sometime between the next 5 and 15 years. I fully echo a number of sentiments that were expressed earlier regarding the cost of housing, and all signs indicate that the cost of housing is only going to be going up. And I believe it was one of the previous speakers that mentioned that the only way to adequately address that issue is to build more housing. So we're just concerned that this is perhaps a missed opportunity for Middlesex Center to allocate some additional lands for development. We're seeing, exponential growth and exponential demand for residential housing types across the entire spectrum of housing, whether that's low, medium, or high density. And again, we're just questioning whether the appropriate analysis has been done in the correct order to arrive at the conclusion that is going to be the most beneficial for Middlesex Center. There has been a lot of talk about servicing and the adequacy of servicing, and we fully recognize that any development would have to be on, or at least in settlement area boundaries, would have to be on full municipal services. Now, in our submissions, we questioned, why only potential expansion areas have been identified in areas that have servicing constraints, and why not look at allocating more of that to Camoka Kilworth, Ilderton, those areas. I'm not necessarily going to comment on the viability of the expansions in Arva and Delaware, simply because that is not the purview of our comments at this time. But I would encourage the municipality and their consultants to take another look at the analysis that has been conducted, particularly in light of the demands that we're seeing in the development industry right now, particularly in regards to housing, and see if this is actually in the best interests of Middlesex Center. Again, I encourage council to review the submissions that we made on behalf of our clients. And again, we just want to make sure that this is done right, and is going to be benefiting Middlesex Center, and is going to be the roadmap for development and land use in the municipality over the next 25-year planning horizon. We just want to ensure that nothing is missed and things are done right. I'm happy to answer any questions on our submissions or anything that I've said. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Mike Pletch from Dillon Consulting.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, no, okay, thank you. I'll just be a few minutes. We're the engineering consultant with Cirrus Developments, so that's the property in Delaware that's been spoken about already. I'll just confirm that we did do a preliminary servicing report to bring sanitary sewers to Delaware. There's two viable options, both the treatment plant on our client's property and a pumping station and sending it to the treatment plant in Camoka. I know costs are always a concern for municipalities, but as was driven home, we have a local developer who's willing to help finance it through a front-end agreement. And again, the chicken and the egg thing, it keeps coming up over and over. The presenter from WSP said that the reason that the Delaware boundary hasn't been expanded was due to services not being planned. But it has been discussed. There's been decades of reports and studies planning for it. We have a developer who's willing to help finance it. And as Mr. Stapleton mentioned, I think we really need that surety from council to bring the developable lands into the urban boundary for the financing and the work to proceed. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pletch. Our next presenter is Ali Soufan from York Developments.
Good morning, Your
Good
Worship.
morning.
And Council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. Let me start the video here. I apologize. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I tend to agree with most of the speakers prior to myself in principle. I would say that Middlesex Center has a wonderful opportunity to capture the current market, and the growth of the market moving forward, I think, is a new reality based on the Minister of Finance's prediction. 2.3 million people will be moving to the province of Ontario within the 10-year horizon period. And I would say Middlesex Center has a real opportunity for a number of reasons, but it is the crown jewel of the region, in my humble opinion. It has great topography, great recreational natural areas, and I would say it outpositions all of its neighbors, whether it's the big city or some of the other smaller municipalities. And I think it's time to capture that opportunity. We're a large landowner in all of the sort of the specific towns here. Arva, or hamlets, Arva being one, Kilworth, Kamoka being the other, and Delaware thirdly. And so we represent ourselves, and we're in joint venture with the Spivak family on a number of their properties as well. I would say to you that the chicken and the egg concept is a real thing, and we've experienced it in many other municipalities over the last couple decades. It's a bit of a scenario where services really should be looked at in parallel to a boundary expansion. And I think there's still an opportunity here if council would consider a referral back to deal with ourselves as private investors and landowners, as well as the consultants. We've had a great run with staff in regards to all the work that's been done to date, and we really much appreciate that. I think there's still some work to be done, specifically in those three hamlets. I would hate to see the oversight and rushing this, for lack of a better term. I think we have an opportunity to do it right. And I would say it doesn't take very long to pull a really good master servicing plan together. I know there's some work being done thus far. We've done our own diligence. We think that these three hamlets can be serviced effectively and efficiently. We just need to band together as a group and figure out a front-ending agreement. You know, we've been involved with other municipalities similar to Middlesex Center, and we've prepaid development charges in order to justify expansion of services, whether it be, you know, from a sanitary perspective, pollution plan perspective, or some of the soft services. So our commitment is there. The idea of risk to the municipality is minimal. You know, front ending is great, but it's tied to building permits and absorption. We're here to put our money where our mouth is, and we're here to prepay development charges for any infrastructure that's required, because we believe in the health and viability of growth in Middlesex Center. Again, we think it is one of the most attractive areas in our region. So again, I'm going off script totally, because I think the folks previous to me hit all the major points, but we'd really like the opportunity to go back and regroup with Middlesex Center staff and some of the consultants to see how we can round out some of the sharp corners, because I think information is key here, and we appreciate your time and the efforts today and moving forward. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jane Campbell.
Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Bender, Mr. Cook, members of the public. My name's Jane Campbell. I live at 22924 Kamoka Road, Hillview Farm, Kamoka. So we're just north of the CPR tracks, north into Kamoka. My first comments are specific to Section 5, which is settlement area policies and land use designation. I come from a farm, so I may be the only farmer speaking today. I'm not a planner. 5.1.1, definition of adjustment to settlement boundaries would be useful. Without definition, interpretation is left wide open for planners and developers. Developers could find a way to further their agendas for phasing and may try to access land through adjustment, while others may see this as expansion. It worries me that it is proposed to allow these adjustments outside of a comprehensive review. 5.1.3, on Schedule A, lands are shown to be within floodlines, and houses, no building should be allowed within floodlines or on hazardous lands. I just saw a few minutes ago a hazard land overlay. I would recommend do not build on these lands. There's problems down the road. 5.14B, it's important that development continues where it already exists. So keep on building on Glendon. I think don't go elsewhere. Developers should not have to say when and where development occurs. I think that should be our council who is deciding the time frame for this. 5.1.5C, as I commented in August of 2020, if agricultural areas are affected, an agricultural impact assessment should be required. These have been around since 2017. They're not in this OP. I recommend publication 851 from OMAFRA. It's guidelines on permitted uses in Ontario's prime ag land. Middlesex Centre is a rural area. Yes, it's the crown jewel. That's Mr. Sufan's right. It's the crown jewel. 5.2B, it's really encouraging to see reference made to public health and safety and the natural environment. 5.2E, glad to see this. As to date, no one's ever shown much concern for our farm. Like right now, we've got 2 appeals into the OMAFRA Drainage Tribunal for houses on Union Ave. So yeah, take the farm beside the development into consideration in the future, please. 5.3.1, I raised the importance of protecting farmland for food security, October the 17th. In the lands needs assessment, they talk about growth for housing and employment, but food security should also be in there. 5.3.1D, we weren't allowed to continue our farming practices. We are restricted farmland now. 5.4.1C, perhaps it's time for the municipalities to speak up what's good for the community. I know you have to do sometimes what the county and the province tell you, but you've got people, look at the October 27th people who spoke up for Kilworth and Kamoka. They're the people who vote for you. 5.4.1D, it'd be useful to have an inventory of class 1 to 4 farmland. 541G, please update the benchmark price figure 16 years ago is not reflective of today's market prices. Just a couple points on section 6, municipal design policies. Again, there's little transition between our farm and the Kamoka residential area. Essentially, it's a CPR railroad. So we get trespassers, we get dogs running at large that chase our cattle. Yeah, so in the future, I think that's important to look after. 6.2E, unfortunately, reverse logging did occur on Kamoka Road. So we have a drainage ditch and a fence to look at our gateway. So if you can prevent this in the future, that would be great. Okay, so it's just some general comments on farming. We're members of the OFA, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. 2021 is the year that they launched their homegrown campaign for farmland preservation, given the increased awareness of food supply and sourcing due to COVID-19. Our zone director, Crispin Colvin, was interviewed for the October issue of Better Farming. He says less than 5% of Ontario is farmland. We have to help our urban centers realize they have to grow within their boundaries. And if we're going to grow populations and businesses, let's have them go to places where you don't have arable land. Since we lose 175 acres of farmland each day to urban development, we have to protect what we've got left, or we're going to be a net importer of food. Kathy Lennon, an OFA general manager, recently said, the average Ontarian needs to understand why farmland preservation is important. It ensures the long-term availability of safe, healthy, nutritious food. Currently, the Ontario government is updating the projection methodology guideline. That's where you calculate land needs for housing and employment based on projection. Today, Mr. Cook gave their presentation. The Christian Farmers Federation of Ontario, Director of Policy, had a very good article in October, Ontario Farmer. I can't say it any better than her. So what she said was, some areas of prime ag land surrounding large settlement areas like London experience significant development pressures. This comes at the cost of significant loss of farmland. Currently, there's no process to calculate the food production needs of the population or how these needs will be met now and in the future. The CFFO reiterated our call for the province to set regulations would not allow settlement expansion into prime farmland. Thank you, Councillor Heffernan, for bringing that point up earlier. As a society, it is time we recognize food as a basic human need alongside housing and meaningful work. We need to strike a better balance. While the PPS and our municipal official plan all purport to protect farmland, they assume primacy of land use for housing and employment. In Mr. Alexander's presentation today, he indicated that there's an urban surplus of 27 gross hectares in Kamoka-Kilworth. Perhaps this is time to reclaim some of our prime ag land. I would suggest that the proposed Brantham development, Redrick Estates, would be a good candidate. An original 100-acre farm was split to accommodate the settlement boundary expansion. That this development is 21 hectares. I wonder if a decade ago, when this was approved by OP 828, if due consideration was given to food, environment, and safety concerns. This is good farmland. Kamoka Creek is there. Remember the Thames Valley Angler presentation? Mr. Houghton talked about railway safety, and you'll have drainage problems again, like I talked about that in December last year. So I hope the updated official plan reflects the vision statement reported in the new strategic plan, a thriving, progressive, and welcoming community that honors our rural roots and embraces our natural spaces. I agree with Councillor Scott. Development should happen in Delaware. I think that Kamoka's had enough. Councillor Arts made a good point. What is this growth costing us in infrastructure? Is it really worth the cost? I think you should think about that. The deputy mayor touched about surplus farm residences. I brought this up in August of 2020. It's still not dealt with. So I rushed today because I don't want to get cut short. I've got my cow beside me for backup. Like, we are true farm people, and we are the crown jewel, Mr. Soufan, and we're lucky to live here. So thank you for the opportunity to talk this morning. Bye now.
Thank you. And next we have Mr. Laverne Kirkness, who's speaking for Timmerman Developments Limited. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Kirkness.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and council members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for those speakers before me. I'm here to represent at this particular presentation Bill Timmerman's Developments from Delaware. And you probably know that Bill has been developing down there for the last 40, maybe more years, and has quite a perspective on what should happen to Delaware. So we're here today to kind of get on side with all of those before us that spoke, both councillors and landowners that are supporting more development, more growth be permitted in Delaware. I did submit a 4-page document, and the last 2 pages really talks about a big move where perhaps the township might want to consider what Watson stated in their report, that there was a need for more employment land in Delaware, and that perhaps along the 402 would be a good location. Perhaps if you combine that concept with all of the development intentions in Delaware for residential, you would have really something quite magical and something that is very strong and could easily be justified, particularly with all of the support I'm hearing. I think Mr. Timmerman will offer himself up as the third or fourth developer that is prepared to front end and help the municipality with the cost of municipal services for Delaware. Could I share my screen for a moment?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. Can you see a plan there with two little red circles, 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Timmerman has been kind of standing in line actually for these two developments for quite a number of years, and did think that this time he would be finally brought into the urban growth boundary. And here he has located, well, he's kind of got on the edge of a future expansion area, but it would seem to us that perhaps the whole graphic here should be much more conceptual if in fact this is what's going to happen. If we're trying to describe approximately which direction Lambeth, Delaware is to grow, perhaps a kidney-shaped arc or some kind of graphic to indicate that there's more than one land holding that could be considered when that time comes. We're hoping that it's considered now as other are, so that we can have the certainty that we are within a settlement area. But more than that, the last 2 pages of our submission kind of sets out, oh gosh, 7 reasons, 7 fairly major kind of reasons why Delaware is so well positioned to become a larger urban center, and you know, its location by the 402 kind of by itself. It's considered quite a desirable place to live. There's landowner developer intentions. There's landowner developer cooperation to work as a team. Certainly it would help balance the growth of the municipality. It would bring residential and industrial growth perhaps together, which would at least reduce the possibility of having to commute long distances. There's servicing strengths, we know, but we can overcome those. And most notably was that point about the employment area that's needed, that is best suited along the Highway 402. So we're kind of hoping that the municipality would see it as a way of at least developing a policy framework in the new official plan that would say, look, we intend Delaware to be a fully municipally served growth node throughout the next 25 years. It may be not tomorrow because we don't have the infrastructure, but we're going to start now to plan it. And so set out the boundaries and perhaps put them in a policy framework where they could be flexible, approximate, but at least give some certainty to those landowners that would want to spend time and money and effort with the municipality to bring about municipal servicing. My first 2 pages had questions, and if I could just ask you, Madam Mayor, the first question had to do with section 931, asking for the meaning of planning period. And it could be 25 years, or it could be the time up to the next comprehensive review. And I wondered what that meant in that section 931.
This isn't a question and answer period. If you'd like to make comments or just list your questions, go ahead. But
okay.
Yeah, it's an
Okay,
opportunity.
and that's fine, because we can follow up with these. Another one was that I did think that there was a conflict in 933 where it talks about private communal servicing can be considered, but then it lists those communities where it can happen, and Delaware isn't included in there, which seems to me to be something, because there are vacant lands within the existing settlement area that could be privately communally serviced, but this policy would prevent that. The third question was about, have we reconciled the special policies in the existing official plan with the new policies? Because again, special policy number 3 in the existing official plan doesn't really allow anything but municipal services within the settlement area, but then 933 of the new official plan does. So we're looking for a resolution to that conflict. We already spoke of the future expansion areas being approximate, at least that's how they're described in words. And yet the map is very finite and takes an actual property and defines it. And we think it should be more of a blob of color or graphic that kind of indicates the future growth so that more than one property could be considered. And lastly, if we look at the graphic, the circle with number 2 in it is presently outside the growth boundary, as you know, and is designated rural industrial. And Mr. Timmermans and I are coming to you asking if that could at least be changed to residential, since it's bordered on 2 sides by residential, open space on a 3rd, and then an arterial road, Longwoods Road on the south. There is one Stevenson garages along the north side, but we do think that number 2 area would be more appropriate as future residential. And certainly number 1 already is, but it does show the location and the proximity of the future expansion area as designated. So again, I would ask that the committee or the council and staff look at the last 2 pages in particular of our submission that tries to present Delaware as a real opportunity for not just residential growth, but also the future industrial area that is already identified in the Watson study as something that's being needed. Now, Bill Timmerman is listening too, and I know he probably thinks I've missed something, and I wonder if you would give him an opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I was just saying, Mr. Timmermans is not on the line.
He's not on the
line? No, so, yeah, that.
I think I just heard him.
Okay, well, we'll be moving on then. He isn't on the screen or line, so our next speaker, thank you for the presentation then, and we'll move to Don Foster is our next speaker. Don? Where is there? Okay. Mr. Foster is not picking up, I guess is the right way of putting it right now. So let's move to Lindsay Clark from Sifton Properties. And if we can get connected to Mr. Foster, we'll come back to him. Here we are. The floor is yours, Lindsay.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. I am Lindsay Clark with Sifton Properties Limited, located at 1295 Riverbend Road in London, Ontario. We have submitted comments to Middlesex Centre in regards to the OP review on November 15th, 2021, with respect to the property located in Ilderton at 13161 Ilderton Road, with frontage on 10 Mile Road and connection to Sifton's Timberwalk subdivision via Songbird Lane. We are requesting consideration to amend the current and proposed OP update from settlement employment to residential and medium density residential as shown on Schedule A7. We believe there is justification to convert these lands from employment to residential to provide Ilderton additional opportunities for growth. We believe the residential growth is unbalanced between the settlement areas of Ilderton and Kamoka-Kilworth, with the proposed growth in Ilderton at 21% and Kamoka-Kilworth at 62%. Due to the current housing demand we believe there is a current need for additional lands in Elderton and for the future 25-year planning horizon. The conversion of employment lands to residential would be justified and would allow for the natural continuation of residential lands through the existing Timberwalk subdivision. In addition, we are in support of the urban settlement growth boundary expansion in all settlement areas and specifically in the Elderton settlement area for residential designations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Is Mr. Foster? Okay, we're going to move on then to John Armstrong and Andrew Payne from Masonry Works Council of Ontario.
Hi there, I hope I'm coming through all right.
You are, the floor is yours, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for giving us the chance to speak today. My name is Jeff Bolachowski with the Masonry Works Council of Ontario. We're the professional association representing the brick, stone, and block sector in this province. I know my colleague Andrew Payne, our executive director, is also here with us. So we're here today because of our province-wide initiative called Building Tomorrow's Heritage Neighborhoods Today. We've been working with communities for the past several years to help build future neighborhoods to a higher standard through strong design policies and planning documents like official plans. We've seen a lot of great plans, and we've been pleased to engage with Middlesex Centre for the past little while. So from our perspective, and I know there's been some discussion around the future of communities such as Delaware, but from our perspective, we're glad to see this plan taking steps to reinforce policies that concern urban design and built form. I think one thing that we're especially happy to see is that design is now part of the minimum requirements for a secondary plan, which is something that we consider to be in line with good practice we've seen across the province of Ontario. So from our perspective, this OP is a clear step forward in raising the quality of built form within the community. And we hope to see a lot of the new language around design and a reinforcement of external design guidelines retained and approved once the final revision is prepared. So our recommendations for the community now are to look at the next steps, which is to take a closer look at more detailed forms of urban design. We know that there's an existing general design guidelines document that's referenced by the official plan. So we think that to build on this official plan, there should be another look taken at the urban design guidelines to renew the focus on the material standards, looking at appropriate exterior cladding materials, strong architectural standards, and really extending this sort of design policy to non-farm and industrial types of development. Some of the comments we've heard throughout this meeting today have concerned maintaining a small town feel in many of the communities throughout Middlesex Centre. And design policy really has a strong role to play in that in terms of articulating a very clear vision for the types of neighborhoods and communities that you would like to build. And the other thing we know is that when you take these kinds of clear visions, when you have unambiguous policy that's very clear about what you're looking for, it does tend to speed up the approval process, which is so important now at this time when we are experiencing such a significant housing crisis. As we like to say, the neighborhoods that you're going to be building today will become the heritage neighborhoods of tomorrow. So make sure they're built to last. So I won't take any more of your time. All I can say is going forward, we really hope that this official plan will be followed by a close look at the townwide urban design guidelines with a renewed focus on natural durable building materials. Again, thanks for your time today. We encourage you to keep a focus on building tomorrow's heritage neighborhoods today.
Thank you for that perspective, Jeff, and we look forward to hearing more. And now we have Tom DeKay. Okay, so he's our last person.
Here.
I hear you. I don't see you yet, Tom.
Okay.
There you are. The floor is yours if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Tom DeKay, and I'm here with Joe Robson and John DeKay. The Robson and DeKay families have been residents of London Township and Middlesex Centre for years. We both operate our businesses in Middlesex Centre, and we're the joint owners of 22440 Hyde Park Road, which is a 100-acre parcel located at the southeast corner of Hyde Park Road and Meadow Creek Drive. Our lands are located entirely within the Ilderton urban settlement area and are designated settlement employment. Through the municipality's official plan review process, we are seeking to convert our property to the designations that permit these lands to be developed for a mix of residential, complementary commercial, and open space uses. We've been involved in this process and have been talking to staff of Middlesex Center in the county for over a year. We've submitted a document on June 28th, as well as a letter on November 15th, as well as attending several meetings with staff. We would like to convert and develop our lands to a mixed use, including residential. And from a servicing perspective, we're told our lands would be very easy to service due to the proximity to the sewage treatment plant. We would like to make sure that our lands and the future development of our lands are not connected in any way to the lands owned by Western. And we would like to request that as part of the official plan review, our property at 22440 High Park Road be further evaluated for conversion from employment to non-employment lands. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that presentation too, which brings us to the end of the people who have registered to speak. At this time, I'm going to ask if there are any members of the public who are attending virtually who would like to comment on the application. If you would use your raise hand feature now, then we'll have staff work to get you into the queue.
Also already spoken, we won't hear from them again. We'll move to Craig.
Okay, the first person we have who's got their hand up is Craig Linton.
Hello.
Hello, Craig. The floor is yours. We're giving people no more than 10 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to speak through you to the rest of council and to staff. My request is fairly simple, and it just pertains to 10036 Ilderton Road. Council and perhaps some staff might remember a fairly recent consent process where there were 3 lots severed off. We had requested as well a severance of the existing farmhouse, and that severance was ultimately rejected because of the fact that the farmhouse itself, the area of that farmhouse simply is not included or was not interpreted to be included within the existing settlement boundary. It's a bit of an odd situation because the break, I'll call it, in the settlement boundary along that north frontage of the property is fairly small. I'm not certain why it was left out on the previous official plan amendment process, and I'm not quite sure why it's proposing to still be excluded from the settlement boundary. To be very clear, the property owners would like the frontage to come into the settlement boundary to simply facilitate a severance of the existing old farmhouse on the site. They would prefer to simply sever that off from the remaining farmland so that they can sell the house and just retain the farmland. So, you know, it's when you drive by, the house is certainly part of the fabric of the settlement of Poplar Hill Coldstream, and I think that it should be reflected as such in the official plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have N. Lane. Hello, if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Name is Bill Timmermans, 3587 Woodhull Road.
Laverne speak on behalf of Mr. Timmermans, so if he wants to take 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, if you'd like to take a couple minutes and just summarize, we had you listed under the time for Timmerman Developments with Mr. Kirkness. So go ahead and if you could make your remarks.
Okay, thanks, Madam Mayor and Council. Anyways, I'd like to thank Michael DeLulo, WSB and Watson Associate staff for taking all this time to get this official plan into fruition. I think when it's all done, we all need a holiday. I think a lot of my answers or a lot of my questions are answered through the previous planners and landowners that were interviewed. I do have, of course, I still have some issues regarding Delaware. In Delaware, basically, we can't further development any farther except for full municipal services. We've understood that, and we were at that back in 2008 when I met with municipal staff at the community center in Kamoka, and that time I was meeting with some other landowners that we had felt the information we got at that time that possibly Delaware would be serviced within the next 8-10 years. So here we are about a dozen years down the road, and we're still not there. Now, I know it states in the final draft of the official plan report that sufficient potential development land is available within the present village boundaries in the Delaware settlement areas to accommodate future growth. Now, there are 2 larger parcels left in the settlement area, and one is the Glover property, and the other one is owned by a man by Bill Jennison property. Both sites are about 18 acres. I know the Glover property, they're interested in developing, but since there's no communal services permitted in the settlement area of Delaware, which is states in the official plan, and it's only allowed in that 7 hamlets, which is Ballymote, Burr, Bryanston, Poplar Hill, Coldstream, Denfield, Loba, and Melrose. So anyways, those properties there cannot be developed at this time because there's no full services. And even if they were willing to service them, the Jennison property, for instance, I know several developers, including myself, have approached him in the years. He's not interested in selling, and he will not be developing, and he's not really interested in selling it. And if somebody was interested in purchasing that property, you know, no one is going to put that amount of money what he's asking for it if he didn't want to sell if there's no services available. So basically what I'm saying is growth, existing boundaries, like growth in existing roads is pretty well come to capacity. There might be a few lots left. Basically where we're at right now, we're in limbo, and development is dead in Delaware. We can't go any further unless we have full services in Delaware. And I stand to be corrected, but you know, unless these properties, you know, the internal properties that are still available are developed, nothing will happen. Where we're just going to sit there in limbo until we have full service in place. And to make that affordable, boundary settlement area boundaries would have to be extended, I think, to make it affordable to bring full service to Delaware. And we're in a unique location, you know, being close to the 402 corridor, the potential for commercial industrial development, and it would also bring residential, which would be, you know, close by for employment. I think those considerations would have to be taken in place. And I'm hoping, since, you know, I've been involved in 2 official plan amendments over the last 25 years, I've been a resident of Delaware for 65 years and have developed since 1984 in Delaware about 150 building lots. And actually, before I came here, I came off an excavator because my operator didn't show up. And I'm doing the second last lot that's left in the subdivision here behind the water tower. And I'm finished, I'm done. And there's a parcel which was part of that property that I developed. There's about 16 acres left. I was not included in the road boundary. I don't know why that did not happen. There's 2 road allowances going into the property there with services right at hand, right there, and I wasn't included, so maybe somebody can look at that or explain to me why that happened. And I think that's basically where I'm at right now. I hope council can see a future in Delaware and hopefully give us a chance to let Delaware grow and maybe possibly get municipal service there in the shorter term rather than the longer term. Thank you very much for giving me the time to speak, Madam Mayor and Council.
Thank you. I think we're at the end now. One more to go. Mr. Sargatis, Peter Sargatis is next.
Yes, hello, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Peter Sargatis. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I have three brief points, and I guess this has been a long hearing for everybody. A lot of good points. My main issues are, first of all, I asked for a map to be presented. I don't have the technical capabilities of presenting a map. I don't know if you could see me on the screen.
We just see your name, sir.
Okay.
We did get, our package did include your letter, your content that you submitted.
And there was a map with it?
I can't see it on mine right now.
Okay. Well, just to describe, I'm at 14683 Medway Road. And there was a zoning change at the south end of the 100-acre property to reflect an open space walkway, and I need that to be shown on the mapping. And I didn't see that on any mapping that is available. So that's my first point.
Through the chair, this is the municipal clerk, and I'm just going to jump in at that time to note that Mr. Sargatis did make an additional submission this morning with respect to a map that he had indicated he would like to display on screen. We did not receive a request for staff to display that on screen from Mr. Sargatis. If you bear with me a few minutes, I can proceed to have that map brought on screen, but you can proceed with your comments in the interim.
Okay, that's great. Now, immediately east of Arva is from the Comgord property that made an earlier presentation asking to be included in the growth area boundary. There are about 20 or so properties, and I would request that they be designated as a settlement area. This will include the 12 houses on the south side of Medway Road, the Centennial School and the school buildings, and the houses surrounding the school. So please consider adding this settlement designation to that area because it's an established community. So that's my second point. The third point is that there are about 500 new housing units projected in the village of Arva, but no decision has been made on the servicing path or where the housing will be located. The growth could be east or west of the current village boundary, and the new official plan should reflect those options for growth. Thank you very much. Anyway, the map right now is upside down that I'm looking at. If that could be reversed.
Sorry, I turned myself off. I was just confirming that you have no more comments to make, sir?
Yes, well, those are my three comments, and the map.
Okay. Okay, I didn't want to cut you off. That was it. Okay,
Yes.
thank you for taking time to come and speak to us then. I think that is the end. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your presentations and for bearing with us as we go through all the technical pieces. I just want to conclude by saying that we've heard a lot of information today, and I'm reinforcing that no decision is being made now. Council will take all of this information in, and staff has made notes as well. We're going to digest and think, and well, no conclusions, as I said today. We'll work on a conclusion going forward though. So now we're done this part of the meeting. So I need a motion that council receive the official plan review presentations and public meeting as information, and that council rise from the public meeting at 12:32 and return to regular council. Mover, please, Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that is carried. Good. Just checking. All right, there are no notices of motion. There's only one correspondence item, and we need a motion that council receive the official plan review correspondence submissions as information. Those are the ones that were in our package. Councillor Heffernan and Councillor Shipley, all in favor? And that is carried as well. Thank you. There is no other business, so we have bylaws. The motion before us is that bylaw 2021, number 105, be adopted as printed. Councillor Arts and Councillor Cates, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And the last item, but not the least, is that Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Center adjourned the November 17, 2021 council meeting at 12:33 p.m. Deputy Mayor Brennan and Councillor Cates, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, thank you, Council, for all your listening and participation. We'll have to get